Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Reason We Learn. I'm Deb Philman, mom, homeschooler, ex-teacher, individualist. So right now I don't really have anything specific to react to or reference. I just had some things on my mind that I wanted to kind of flesh out by talking. And as odd as it sounds, if I talk to the camera and I get something worthwhile that you might want to listen to, I thought I'd share it with you and get your feedback. So here's the problem I'm having when I'm trying to fight the woke, if you will, the church of woke, the critical race theory, critical social justice theory, and all of that that's coming into our schools and our lives in general, our workplaces too. The biggest problem is how much projection is involved in it and how much truth there is in it, but not in it, like not in the way critical social justice looks at the world, but at how the world actually is and should be looked at. So let me explain what I mean. Okay, for example, we all know, all honest, rational people in America know that we have a racist past. We do. Absolutely. It's well documented. You can't deny it, okay? We also know that racism itself, in terms of the ideas people can hold in their heads about people, the biases people can have, is not absolutely dead. Okay, there are no doubt people walking around who still make decisions about people based solely on their race. There's no doubt also that the racism in our past found its way into our institutions and was in fact there at the groundbreaking of some of them, most notably the public schools. I've said it on this channel before. The great irony of the public schools insisting they're going to be the instrument of change and the instrument of progress in this regard is laughable. They can't unless they plan to close their doors, close up shop, and simply give the money back to the parents and say, we failed, go do what you're going to do. Because they created the public school system in part to preserve white supremacy. The people doing it at the time were very open about it. People like Woodrow Wilson in the early part of the 20th century, affirmed that at a teacher's college speech where he explicitly said that we were going to create two types of educated people. And while he didn't specifically say black and white, it was fairly obvious. The public schools themselves were brought into being and popularized by xenophobic people who were worried about immigrants coming in who didn't speak English and might be too Catholic, and that might upset the apple cart and so forth. So it was all based on a kind of bigotry, fear, racism, etc., that the government was enlisted to force people into a certain kind of assimilation and education to control them and to control former slaves who would be coming up from the South and looking to get educated. Oh, we got to control this situation. Don't want too much competition for jobs, etc. This was government doing this. The people, by and large, the majority of people weren't clamoring for public education. They were doing fine, achieving 98% literacy, including black people, by the way, without the help of the government. So when the government started doing this, it was the powerful who were the powerful. Well, what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that the people who were in power, most of whom were white, wanted to maintain their power. I don't know, and I can't say for certain that all of them wanted to maintain the power in the hands of white people, but I know that many did. They're well documented. They've said so in various things. They were open about it at the time because it was a more openly racist society. So that part's true. That part's true. The school system was created for that, to control, to sort people into groups, to keep people only so smart that they would be comfortable with menial factory jobs and things like that, not to really think critically. The kids who were the children of the powerful and so forth were always going to get to go to private schools or the quote unquote best public schools eventually, but it wasn't the case in the beginning. They all went to private school or they were homeschooled. And so here I am now in 2021, and I'm trying to fight this stuff coming into the schools when really what I want to do is fight the schools. I just want them to just close. I want them to end. I will be honest with you guys. I don't think you will ever see any reform. I don't think you can reform it. I don't think you can take a system that's broken from the outset and put in a new curriculum or a new approach or equity or, whatever you call it. I think it's disingenuous. I think it's grifting. But let me back up a second and explain why. Okay, going back to why the schools are founded and the fact that white supremacy was a real thing and racism was a real thing. You then have to ask yourself, at what point in our history did we ever do anything real to help Black people? I had a conversation today with someone who asked me that question, and it got me thinking, well, what's the answer? And the answer for me, as a person who treasures liberty and the Constitution, was the only thing I could think of that was truly constructive and had the potential to legitimately help Black people. I mean, really help, was the Civil Rights Act, insofar as it covered public policy, meaning like, federal dollars, state dollars, law, all that kind of stuff. As far as that went, that had great potential. It basically meant, we're going to get out of your way. We, the government, finally, after almost 200 years of getting in your way, being a thorn in your side, hindering you, hampering your development, etc., we're going to get out of the way and let you grow and flourish like every other American. That, I think, was, lifting a very real yoke off of people of color. But almost immediately, like right away, it was ruined by the Great Society programs, in my opinion. I think it also was hindered by the extension of the civil rights laws into private spaces. Namely, if you own a private business, like you must do this and you must do that. It kind of went a bit too far. And so you may not make discriminating laws. The government can't discriminate. The government can't force you to discriminate, which is what the Civil Rights Act did. Suddenly it was like, and you private business, you have to do these things. It took that into a realm where it had not previously been. And some people might say, so you're saying it would have been okay for a privately owned restaurant to continue to discriminate? Morally, of course not. Ethically, of course not. But I'm saying by making it illegal to do that, I think you actually paradoxically entrenched certain racist views by having the shift of government force be onto the racists or onto the potential racists by treating all white people, all people, period, as guilty until proven innocent. You may not do this. You may not leave people out. It's like, what if I have another reason? Like, what if I have a reason for not wanting to do business with, hire, serve somebody, and it's not because they're Black, but they happen to be Black, and now you were assuming it's because of racism. So you see how this can go awry, and we're seeing that today too. So I think those kinds of use of force to, say, well, this isn't going to move fast enough. People aren't going to change their minds fast enough, so we're going to force them to do it because, they won't do the right thing. I think that does more harm than good. I think you end up having the opposite of the desired effect. Does it take longer for people's views to change? Probably. But I also believe that nothing sells like success. What I mean by that is that if you get out of people's way and you truly believe they're equal and you let them thrive and you let them do what they're going to do and they succeed and they start building business and they start providing great services and people want to interact and trade and marry and, friendships and so forth, which was already happening even before the Civil Rights Act. Suddenly the people who still want to hang on to their bigotry in the private realm, they're marginalized. They're on the outs. They become the minority and they just gradually realize there's no social currency whatsoever in continuing to hold on to those values and those beliefs, and they let them go. Is it slower? Well, I don't know. Again, it's slower only in terms of your ability to see the inclusion. You aren't forcing it on them, but is it slower in terms of actually changing people's minds? I don't think so. I think it's slower to change people's minds by forcing them to do things they don't want to do. Do you really think the baker out in wherever it was that he didn't want to bake the cake for the gay couple? Do you think you're changing his mind by forcing him to bake a cake? Do you think you're changing the minds of any Christian person who's currently, not supportive of gay marriage by forcing that baker to bake a cake? Nope. And do you think there are other bakeries that would be only too happy to get the business? Absolutely. Do you think that guy's going to learn more quickly if he's not getting that business and that business is worth getting? Of course. People act in their own self-interest. So when you force somebody to do something, I think it's counterproductive. But I genuinely believe that was the last time. It was like, hey, Civil Rights Act. Oh, wait a second. Now we're going to force people to do things. And I bet there were even Black people at the time who were like, because then you might go into a business and they might be doing business with you, but to your face, but then the second you walk out, they're like, pfft. Or maybe they don't, they charge you a little more and you don't know about it because they were forced to do business. Who knows? But I'd be always wondering, like, do you want to do business with me? Are you being forced to do business with me? Are you hiring me because you want to? Or are you forced to hire me? Like all those things. And then the trust goes down. It's not as easy to recognize who's safe and who's not safe. And those kinds of beliefs get entrenched. Then you add the Great Society programs. Oh, now we're going to, let's buy up all your dilapidated houses. What you say they're dilapidated? What if I think they're great? It's my private property. I'm building equity. I'm building wealth. No, you really want to live in this public housing project, and then it'll be cheaper. And we're making up for. We're going to help you. We're going to make up for all the slavery by giving you a place to live. And now we're going to take care of your kids if you're unmarried. We're going to give you money. And when there was really not an issue with that. In other words, back then, at around the time the Civil Rights Act was passed, the out-of-wedlock births in Black households were lower. The percentage was lower than in white households of the same socioeconomic status. The Black family was actually rather strong because if you come out of a world where they sold your kids away from you against your will and sold your husband away or separated you arbitrarily, or you were living in like a rape culture where you had kids because the master made you have kids, whatever. And now you get to have your own family, your appreciation for family is going to be rather strong. Okay. That's how it was explained to me by somebody who actually is African-American. Maybe I'm wrong. If I am, please feel free to correct me in the comments, but that's how it was explained to me, that it was actually an emphasis on the family and an emphasis on going to church and an emphasis on things that really are supportive of the development of children, learning, etc. Also a heavy emphasis on education because education was denied as well. Literacy was denied. So you had kids performing better, even in their segregated schools, than their white counterparts of the same socioeconomic level. And sometimes even a level slightly above because of the dedication, the sheer dedication of their parents and the dedication of the kids to what the freedom and liberty that would come from literacy. So how does it really help to come in and say, you need us to help you more and you poor thing? And I can't help but feel like not only was it not helpful, but that it was just racism reforming itself, like putting itself into a different format that was going to have the identical effect of preserving power in the hands of the powerful, but dressing itself up more nicely. Like, we're nice now. And every time I go back to history and I look at those things and I look at even who the people were, like the literal individuals, the party in question, the same party that out of which we got the KKK and segregation and Jim Crow laws, it just like suddenly decided in the 60s to be pro-civil rights. It just suddenly decided to care about Black people and their development and their growth and their success in the United States. I have a very hard time swallowing that. Very hard time. I find that magical transition implausible. I just do. And I don't even know that it's partisan politics. I just think when you are in power, and that party was pretty much dominant from World War II on until, Nixon for a little while, and Reagan, because of FDR. And you can go on and on about what a great guy FDR was, and FDR loved Black people. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. If he did, then why didn't he push for a Civil Rights Act? Why didn't he and his wife Eleanor? Why do we have to wait so long? Why did we have to wait for Truman to desegregate the military? Why do people hold him up as like this great guy when it comes to civil rights? I'm not seeing it. Why do you turn away shiploads full of people fleeing for their lives from Nazi Germany? I'm not buying it. Sorry, not. But still, that party pretty much dominated. So I just think the powerful wanted to stay powerful. I think it comes down to that. It's just very simple, mercenary. And, if you can't keep an underclass or a traditional underclass continuing to be an underclass, then who needs you as big government? If that's your shtick, that's what you sell is, help from the government. FDR's whole thing was help from the government. Help is here. Help from the government. If that's your biggest selling point, that's what you've got, that's your platform. How do you keep that up unless you keep having people who need you? And who are the most obvious people who need you? The people who already seem to, because they were on the lower end of the societal totem pole in terms of power. This is all true. This is all, you can go look this up and study the history and find this out. So moving forward, I see the so-called help, Great Society, welfare programs, affirmative action as we get farther down the road. And all of these programs, I'm watching, and one of these days I'm going to do a project. I'm hoping to collaborate with one of my locals members to do this, to take the actual data, the charts and the graphs, and show you visually how the achievement gap widened, how the poverty gap widened, how the out-of-wedlock births skyrocketed, how since the Civil Rights Act and since the Great Society programs were implemented, things got exponentially worse for Black people in America. All the help wasn't very helpful, at least on paper. I don't see the results, and in particular in the public schools. Desegregation, you would think, ought to have been, like the Holy Grail, right? Now you have access to all the same things the white kids have access to, right? Right? In theory? Yeah, except that presupposes the schools were ever about producing educated individuals, as Teresa Sanders said the other day on our live stream. They never were. And you might say, but there were white kids in there. I know. But remember, the powerful still want an underclass of not powerful. They don't really care what color they are. It's just awfully convenient if you already have a large subset of people who are easier to keep down because they're already farther down. It's easier. Okay. So you desegregate, but you now apply all the same things you were doing to poor and lower middle class white people to the Black people who were formerly, ironically, somewhat protected from that, because they had their own schools. They were public schools, but their own teachers who cared in a different way, in an emotional way, about the development of their students, because they were living in literal oppression, right? And as a Jew, like, I kind of understand this, because Jews were segregated too in Europe and stuff like, we don't want you here. Okay, we'll make our own schools. We don't want you in our bank. We'll make our own bank. We don't want you in our hospital or a medical. Okay, we'll make our own doctors, Then you suddenly find out, like, oh, they have really good doctors and they have really good students. They have really good schools. Yeah, well, because we actually care about our own, because we have to, because we know what you're going to do to our kids. We know what you're going to do, what you've done historically. But now these kids, they're in the white schools, but now it's like, all right, we're just going to, dumb everybody down. We're going to keep everybody sort of poor and ignorant and borderline literate and borderline numerate. And then people will say, but our schools were good in the 50s and I got a very good public education. I'm sure many people did, depending where you lived. But if you're talking about urban areas, if you're talking about places where most people went, because at the time, that's where most of the jobs were, most of the industrial, jobs, that wasn't the case for those schools. Just wasn't. Like, the New York City public schools were not awesome for a very long time. Okay? So, ask Thomas Sowell about that and what he had to do to get a good education. So you still had to have somebody in the know to say, you need to come out of that school. You need to be over in this school. And, he's in his 80s. So this has been going on a long, long time. And as I said, I think the irony of desegregation is it lifted an element of protection that exposed these kids. So again, I come back to my original premise of, like, I sort of have a hard time, because there's truth. There was institutional racism. There's also just institutional classism, or institutional government keeping people downism, whatever you want to call it. And so you didn't have true equality of opportunity. You didn't really have equal access to justice and so forth. And now to have the school say, we're going to fix it by saying white people are the oppressor, I get so angry, because I want to say, you're doing it again. You're doing it again. You are now doubling down on the so-called help, because in the space that was already conceived of to keep people down, you're now removing literacy as the number one thing to improve equity of outcome or anything like that. And you're dominating the curriculum with all of this. I'm going to teach you how bad you have things. I'm going to teach you about your enemies. We're going to teach you about how, these power structures and all this kind of stuff, and how you should hate capitalism. Capitalism is the very thing that could lift these people up from poverty, that always has. But we're not going to teach you that. Not that capitalism is perfect, but it's far better than socialism and communism if you want to talk about lifting up the individual and giving them their full freedoms and rights to determine their own lives. No, we're going to teach all this bad stuff. That's helping you. You're not helping anybody. You're destroying these children, and you're destroying the white children, and you're destroying the country in the process. Part of why the country is, facing some of the challenges that we're facing, and no, it's not all, doomsday, but is with all this help that isn't really helpful. And I get so angry because I want to say, like, when they talk about white women's tears and, white fragility and people denying racism, I get so mad because I'm like, I'm not denying racism. I'm admitting racism. There's just one problem. You're the racist. And then I sound like them. I want to say, like, you need to be held accountable, public schools, for the racist behavior of expecting so little from Black students. You need to be held accountable for your condescending ways of speaking to people. You need to be held accountable for the verbal and emotional abuse that you're heaping upon young pre-rational children. But I sound like them. Don't I? It's like, you need to be held accountable. I sound like a finger-wagging woke person. And I get like almost a brain cramp because I don't want to be them. I don't want to tell people to do it. I don't want to force anybody to do anything. I just want to open people's eyes to the reality of the situation, that this isn't helpful. This system isn't going to reform from within. They're just doubling down. They're hurting your kids. If anyone really wanted to help Black children, they would make damn sure that literacy was at the forefront of everything. Not just for them, for all children, but specifically, especially. And this was also conveyed to me today. And I gotta admit, I got kind of upset because it hurts to think about the truth of her words. She said something, and I'm sure to get flack for repeating this, but she said, "What do you call a Black man who can't read?" And I said, "What?" She said, "Incarcerated." And then she explained that an illiterate white man does not have the same propensity for ending up in prison. People are more inclined to give them a second chance. They have even felonies and so forth than a Black man with multiple felonies. And I so badly wanted to refute that. I so wanted to badly say, no, that's not true. Generally, that's not true. But then I thought, she's right. She's right. And now, unlike the woke folks, I'm not going to sit there and we're all guilty and, oh, woe is me, and we need it. No. All it does is reaffirm what I already know to be true. Is that literacy, if you want to truly help these kids, these people, these communities, literacy is the fight. Because, as I said in one of my videos about a week ago, even Frederick Douglass said that literacy is what makes you free. Nobody can take that from you. Nobody can take your ability to learn new things by reading and writing. You can communicate with others. You can develop skills, any skill that you want. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like it's the panacea. It's perfect, but it's a start. It's the start without which you can't do anything. If you cannot read, you can be manipulated. If you can be manipulated, if you can be lied to, then you can be, or if you can't get a job because you can't read, then it's much easier to end up falling into crime or falling into drugs or falling into other things. And I don't mean to sound like a racist thing, and that's what happens to Black people. It's not. It's what happens to illiterate people. And it just so happens that with schools having always been garbage, but just being more garbage in the urban areas, and then people moving out to the suburbs when they could, this tends to fall more heavily on to Black communities. Illiteracy is a bigger problem. It's a problem overall. But even if you look at the achievement gaps today, as I mentioned the other day, if you bring the Black students up to where the average white student is, you're bringing them up to another level of just still mediocrity. That's not really going to help. It's not really going to help. It's like saying you lost your job and you can't keep the place to live and, you're not sure what you're going to do next, but here's $1,400. Does that make it all better? Same thing. Hey, we taught your kid to read to a 3rd grade level. Go us. They're still graduating, not proficient in reading. This has to be for everybody. It's just that maybe they need a little more help from where they're starting because their parents started and so forth and so forth. But none of it had to happen. It all began back then. Not at slavery. At desegregation, civil rights movement, Great Society programs and everything that came and said, we'll help you. And that's what I see in the woke stuff. I see people taking something that is real, something that is true, and doubling down on the non-help for the purpose of maintaining and getting more power. And not just maintaining power over the already less powerful Black community and minority communities in terms of political power, but also now over middle class and lower middle class everyone of every persuasion, white, immigrant, etc., Asian, Hispanic. It doesn't matter. If you're not in the elite, most of whom still happen to be white, but there are some notable Black exceptions now, just really doesn't matter after a point. It's the powerful versus the not powerful. And I'm sitting here telling you all this as a white woman, and you're probably sitting there thinking like, oh, well, you know, he's free, so it doesn't affect you. Yeah, it does affect me. Because what affects people who care about their kids and people who love their liberty affects me too. It affects us all. I can't stand by and watch you lose your liberty, or watch you be lied to, or watch you be manipulated and just say, well, it's okay because it's going to affect me less. First of all, that would make me immoral. Second of all, that would be false. It might affect me less for like 5 minutes, and then it will affect me the same. No one's safe, including these elite. They're not really safe. They just have this illusion because they have delusions of grandeur and they're narcissistic and they have all kinds of other problems. But I am trying to get people out there of every race to hear what I'm saying and say, look, I'm really, truly on the side of humanity. I'm on the side of your kids. I'm on the side of every person having the ability to be free and chart their own course. I don't care what you look like. I don't care where you come from. I don't care what language you speak. I don't care what your religion is. It doesn't matter. In the United States of America, that's your birthright. That's your right even if you emigrated here. So I guess that's just what I want to say is why it's so hard. Is that there is some truth, but the people are taking that truth and they're turning it inside out. And they're making it more true, if that makes sense. And when I try to fight it, I feel like I'm sounding like them. And I know I'm not, really, in my heart. So if this makes any sense to you at all, I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, etc. Because like I said, I'm just sort of riffing on this, and it's just been bothering me today. So I thought I'd share it. Thanks for watching, and thanks for subscribing. If you like this content, share it, comment, etc. Have a great day.